Let's think outside of the box together today and analyze the data which we have, and let's see what could or could not be done in an alternative suggestion that's presented to the world that would totally relieve them of the refugee crisis. Actually, it would solve the entire world's problem in terms of refugees. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد الإمام المهدي وسلم تسليما. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear companion and sister Tiffany.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear father.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me back.
God bless you. So today we're going to talk about something which is really important, and that is the refugee crisis that is occurring around the world. Okay?
Okay.
So the refugee crisis, it's a very big crisis that is taking place around the world, and it is basically causing the shifting, the changing of the geopolitical landscape of the entire world. It is a very hot topic, from the situation in Palestine and the refugees over there to the refugees that are in Europe and within the United States that have caused or allowed for far-right governments to rise. There is a sense of dissatisfaction. I think a lot of countries in the West have agreed with one another that we are all facing a problem, and this problem is illegal immigration. Our countries are being invaded by what they would deem to be strangers, what they call strangers, people that are not like them, people that don't resemble them, that don't share the same ideals as them, that don't share the same culture or religion or language as them, and they deem them to be undesirable and unwanted. They don't want them living in their countries, sharing the same benefits and resources that they have. And it is something which is causing and has caused people and governments like Donald Trump's administration to come back into power after he was about to go to jail, really. He managed to make a comeback and he rose to power once again. And that was due to his stance on illegal immigration and immigrants in general. And we find him now implementing radical policies that the likes that the United States has never seen before. For example, his deal that they are making right now with El Salvador that would allow the United States to deport millions of people to El Salvador, illegal immigrants, as well as any criminals that are U.S. residents or citizens of the United States. We saw him raise tariffs against Canada, primarily because of the illegal immigration situation. We saw him drop the tariffs once Mexico decided to send 10,000 troops to the U.S.-Mexican border in order to secure it. We find Donald Trump sending immigration officers to round up millions of immigrants around the country in order to deport them back. So all of this is costing billions of dollars. All of this is an expression of how big and grave the problem is in the United States, or it's perceived to be this one of immigration. And the fact that all of these millions upon millions of people have voted Donald Trump into office and support him and stand by him is indicative of the fact that his worldview is shared by many. We find the same conversations taking place in the UK. We find that there are policies that are being drafted up at the moment, new rules that are laws that are trying to be passed that would make it harder for refugees to and immigrants to attain British citizenship. They want to raise the years from 5 years to 10 years in order for a person to apply for permanent residency within the UK. They want to make it a thing where unemployed unemployed residents of the United Kingdom would not have a chance of obtaining citizenship within the UK, and they want to make it easier for unemployed residents to be deported back, or refugees to be deported back to their countries of origin, even if they were granted residency status or permanent residency status within the UK, so long as the dynamic changes in their home country. And we also saw that it was not too far back that they had a plan with the previous UK government where they had struck a deal with a particular African nation, and they built some sort of camp over there, and they basically wanted to take all immigrants that were in the process of applying for asylum that arrived on UK soil illegally. They wanted to deport them back to this base in Africa in order that they wait over there while their asylum cases were being processed. And that way, if they were rejected, they would just, have to find their way out of Africa, or just remain in Africa instead of, basically disappearing on UK soil. We saw in the past years this very big problem that was at the center of a debate within the European Union and all of the different European Union countries, where after the situation happened with ISIS in Syria and the Middle East, and you had millions of Syrians and Iraqis being welcomed into the European Union by Angela Merkel of Germany. You had this shift take place where the people were dissatisfied, unhappy. They thought that there was too many immigrants that were welcomed, or too many Muslims that were welcomed into their country, and they thought that that was very bad, and they are seeking to find ways to get rid of them. And there is a rise in far-right governments throughout the European Union. And it's really toppling everything that Western civilization has built over the past period. The crisis of the refugees, it's leading to the fact that even the United States now has withdrawn from the World Health Organization, and it's withdrawn from the United Nations Security Council, and it's planning to withdraw from other climate agreements and things of this sort. It's all of it really. Its traces. Its origins all trace back to this issue that we have with migrants and immigrants, and the fact that people don't want them because they're considering them to be strange, and they don't want these strange people in their lands. They don't want these aliens in their lands. They don't want these foreigners in their lands. And I think that it's a quite interesting thing that is taking place, because it all goes back to the Middle East, and it all goes back to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And we have something big that's going on in the Middle East right now with Palestine and Israel. And we find that the Israelis are not wanting the Palestinians, or at least some of the Israelis are not wanting the Palestinians. Certainly the current administration of Benjamin Netanyahu, they don't want the Palestinians to remain in Gaza, and there are, after the whole place has been destroyed, there was a press conference that just took place a few days ago with Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, and Donald Trump proposed that the 1.5 million, 2 million Palestinians that live in Gaza be given, refugee status in other nations around the world, in particular Egypt and Jordan, in order that basically they fix the situation in Gaza. And so you have 1.5 million to 2 million new Palestinian refugees that are created in a new refugee crisis that's in the Middle East. And you have Egypt and Jordan refusing, and their populations refusing this very notion or this very idea. In the apparent, Jordan and Egypt are refusing to accept refugees on their land because they feel that this will lead to a takeover of the Israelis of Gaza. They are considering it to be a move where the United States is trying to declare control over that particular land, only to hand it over at some point to the Israelis, and that the Israelis would never allow the Palestinians that left that land to come back because they've done it so many times before, taking over and settling in areas, making illegal settlements in places that they weren't allowed to settle in. So in the apparent Egypt and Jordan, they say that they want to protect the Palestinian land by refusing refugees into their land. But in reality, and that certainly might be the feelings of and it is the feelings of the Egyptian population and also the Jordan population. The Jordan and the Egyptian populations, they would love to welcome any Muslims into their land. They're very hospitable people. But they don't want to lose the land to the Israelis, and so they are very pro-Palestinians staying in Gaza so that their land is not taken away from them. But there's another reason that the Egyptian government and the Jordanian government don't want these refugees in their land. And the reason is because they are worried about the Palestinians basically settling in Egypt or settling in Jordan and then launching attacks after organizing with one another, launching attacks from Egyptian soil or Jordanian soil against the state of Israel, right? And thereby giving Israel a reason to go to war against Egypt or the Palestinians that are in Egypt or in Jordan, and that would give them the pretext for another quote-unquote land grab or an Israeli expansion into Egyptian and Jordanian territories, as they have done before with Syria, the Golan Heights, etc.
A security risk.
Exactly, a security risk. So now you just have like a mess going on. From the Middle East all the way to Europe, to America and beyond, you have a crisis. You have a very big crisis, and the crisis is called refugees and it's called immigration. This is the summary of the matter. And I think that it's quite interesting because refugees are a central part of the Abrahamic story. It's a central part of that, and it's a central part of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or God, the God of the Torah and the Bible and the Quran, has had a lot to say about refugees. And it seems like everything that the world is doing today is contradictory to that, even though they proclaim themselves to be followers of that God. The very term strangers, Tiffany, is one that we find first occurring in the Torah, isn't it?
Yeah.
And who's it used to describe?
The Israelites, the children of Abraham through his son Isaac, that lineage, that group of people.
And why were they called strangers?
Well, they were imprisoned in Egypt. They were, the story, they entered Egypt in the time of Joseph, and then they actually ended up becoming imprisoned there and enslaved for 400 years, and until the time of Moses, when they were finally able to leave.
Exactly. And so here we have something that occurs that's very interesting in the history of the Abrahamic faiths. The Israelites, they go and they settle in Egypt. When did they settle in Egypt? When the brothers of Joseph reunite with Jacob, with Joseph in Egypt, and then they settle there and they decide to have children. Mm-hmm. And they multiply in Egypt. They're not Egyptians. They settle in Egypt. Joseph is brilliant. Joseph is honest. Joseph raised in rank in the Egyptian government. He became the number 2 guy. He managed to influence the Egyptian ruler, Akhenaten, And he managed to change the religion of ancient Egypt from being a polytheistic one to a monotheistic one. All right. And so they switched the god Amun with Aton. All right. And Akhenaton, basically the disciple of the god Aten, he manages to make a lot of enemies during his lifetime, all right, because of this religious change.
Yeah.
And then after he passes away, the administration that comes in after that, his successors, they assassinate his son, they take over government, and they begin to erase and basically roll back all of the policies of Akhenaten, and they basically begin to pave the way for the oppression of the Israelites, those whom they deemed responsible for attacking their religion and their state. And that led to the eventual rule many years later of Ramses II, who is known, he's the main villain in the story of the Exodus. He's the arch nemesis of Moses. And basically, he ends up imprisoning continuing on with the imprisonment of the Israelites. They are not granted Egyptian citizenship. They're not allowed to live in peace with the Egyptians in their state. They're regarded as something strange, something inferior, something bad. Their culture is strange. Their language is strange. And the Egyptians, they just simply don't want them there, and there's a real fear of them taking over Egypt. And many of the extra biblical sources speak about and have preserved conversations that took place between Ramses and his advisors, and the father of Ramses as well in his administration, where they were being advised essentially to eliminate newborns from the Israelites, lest their kingdom be taken over or be threatened by the birth of a Messiah. And so they used to systematically eliminate. There was a genocide that was taking place against the Israelites in Egypt at the hands of the Egyptians, all because they were undesired refugees that were living in their land. And so due to that, when Moses eventually frees the Israelites and he successfully crosses over the Red Sea with them, and they are out in the desert now, and they're on their way to the lands of Canaan, and they're on their way towards establishing now their own state, God brings down this set of laws. And one of his most important commandments and laws that he gives to the Israelites is that they don't mistreat any alien, any foreigner, any stranger. And he uses, the Bible is filled with the usage of this particular word, stranger, to describe the people who are refugees or immigrants that would go to join the Israelites. And God says to Moses and says to the Israelites, any stranger who is to come and settle amongst you, you have to treat them as one of you. Grant them all the rights that you guys have. Treat them exactly as you treat one another, because you too were in their same situation before, and you too were strangers in Egypt. And so this term, strangers, is given to the Israelites, all right, whom are God's believing people. The believers are given the term strangers because of the history that they are attached to, having been immigrants, refugees in the lands of Egypt.
Yeah. Well, that's an amazing reminder, and the way that you've described the whole situation, if you have a mind to contemplate, it's actually a very important warning that if you are a believer in God and you believe in Moses and you believe in the prophets and the messengers, God has presented this situation for you in the scriptures that you should be very careful on how you treat strangers, because he's saying that these are the believers. And this has happened before, that strangers came into... The strangers are basically the predecessors of your faith, you know, the Israelites. If you believe in the Abrahamic faiths, you believe that the Israelites were God's people. And they entered into a foreign land, which was Egypt, and they were mistreated, and they were feared, and they were imprisoned and enslaved because the people saw them as foreign and alien and bad. So I think there's a really important lesson to contemplate over, lest you fall into the same mistake that the Egyptians fell into, which was oppressing those people.
Absolutely. Beautifully put, Tiffany. And the same thing repeats itself in the story of the Christians in the New Testament. The Christians are described in the writings of Paul and some of the others, regardless of Paul being a true disciple or not of Jesus Christ. The point is that it was written in there that the followers, the early Christians, were considered to be strangers amongst the Romans and in the Roman territories, in the territories of the pagans, in the various lands really where they were. Even amongst the Jews, they were strangers because they had accepted Jesus Christ, and they were now refugees that were wandering around the land. The disciples, you know their story. They would go from house to house, and Jesus told them to bless anybody that would accept them in, and to curse anybody or the curses of God would be upon anybody that rejected them, and that they would endure a torment that was more painful than the torment that came down upon the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. That would be the punishment of any of those that rejected any of the Christian refugees. And the term strangers is used in the New Testament to apply to the disciples of Christ, because they are strangers from other people, other nations that reject the lordship of Jesus Christ, and because they are also, unfortunately oppressed in the lands. And we know about the stories of the great oppression that the Christians had to endure at the hands of Nero and the Roman administrations that followed that for the first couple hundred years of Christianity's history. It was horrible oppression. They would take Christians and use them. These Christian refugees are strangers. They would use them as candles in the streets of Rome. They would light them on fire. They would dip them down in burning oil, boiling oil, in order that all of their skin melts away from them. They would crucify them. They would hang them. They would decapitate them. They would impale them. All forms of gruesome torture and torment would be implemented upon the early strangers of Christianity. And the same thing is actually true and repeats itself in Islam as well. The Prophet Muhammad he begins to preach the message of Islam, and lo and behold, who are the people that reject the message? The people that reject the message are the people that are the citizens of Mecca, just like the Prophet Muhammad is, right? Yeah. So his fellow citizens, for the most part, they reject the message, and they don't accept him, and they don't want to follow him. And the people that do accept the message of Muhammad and the message of Islam are the refugees, the foreigners, the strangers. People like Salman the Persian. He's not from there. He's a foreigner in a foreign land. He's a stranger. He accepts. Bilal the Ethiopian, right? The Habashi. He accepts the religion of Islam, while the people of Mecca, they do not. And so the Prophet Muhammad preaching the message, you have even one of his companions was a Roman, and he accepted, and he was also a stranger in the land. So you have these individuals gathering around Muhammad, accepting the religion of Islam, professing faith in him, but they all had one thing in common, and that was that they were all refugees, they were all strangers in Mecca. And then the Prophet Muhammad while speaking about the end time of Islam, right, the time of Imam al-Mahdi Mahdi, the time of the Qa'im, what does he say? He says that Islam started as something strange, right?
Yeah.
That was practiced by the strangers, right? He says it started as something strange and it will end as something strange. So glad tidings to the strangers, right?
Yeah.
So he describes those first early companions of his that accepted his message. He gives them the term strangers, and he gives also the term strangers to the companions of the Qa'im or the companions of the Mahdi. And now we know that the Prophet doesn't speak without there being some sort of reason behind it, right? There's no such thing as a coincidence. And stranger is a particularly interesting term that he chose because it mirrors and it holds behind it the connotations of where that word was being used in the Bible and the Torah to describe the first groups of believers with Jesus, the first group of believers with Moses, whom were also oppressed and refugees and immigrants in foreign lands.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've heard that narration and known that narration for so many years, and it never occurred to me that the word stranger is actually connected to what is written in the scriptures in the Old Testament, in the Bible, regarding these foreigners, these people who are seen as refugees and rejects of society and undesirable. God is clearly, he's making that connection with this term strangers. And thank you so much for interpreting the true meaning, or one of the true meanings behind that word strangers, and why the Prophet Muhammad used that word to describe the companions of the Mahdi.
Absolutely. And I think that this meaning behind it is further proven when we actually look into the other narrations describing the companions of the Qa'im, how they come to him from every different land, all right? That they are the children of non-Arabs, they're people that come from various nations, that they all travel to him from the four corners of the earth. Well, people that travel from countries that aren't theirs they're immigrants,
yes,
right?
Of course.
And so a lot of his companions are immigrants, refugees, and people that are members of, and the narrations, they state that there comes to him from every tribe on the earth, one or two people. So he'll have people, immigrants, refugees from all of the nations of the earth. And they're also described as being the undesirables of society, right? Because there are these narrations that explain the verse in the Quran which described the response of, we was quoting the response of the non-believers in Noah when they were saying that they were rejecting his message, and that one of the reasons that they gave for rejecting the message of Noah was that they don't see anybody following him except the lowest of society or the undesirable in society. They see the people that are strange, the people that are low following Noah, and they didn't want to be associated with them. And so Noah himself also has strangers that are following them, and the same case is applicable for all of the prophets and the messengers, especially Moses, Jesus, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and now the Qa'im.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's absolutely true. This is a pattern throughout history.
Yeah, because the strangers, they usually don't find society wanting them, and they have no other refuge except for God, and it's always God's messenger who will open up his hands and his arms and welcome those who are tired and needy and those who, are without a home.
That is so beautiful.
There's also the narration that describes the companions of the Qa'im as carrying their homes on their backs, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so there they go. They don't have a country and they don't have a home, and they're having to move from one country to another all the time, or from one land to another, just like the prophets did before, just like Abraham did. Abraham, when he was trying to escape with his wife, Sarah, what did he have to do in some of the narrations? He had to hide her in a box, and he was carrying her around, and he was traveling from one country to another, and he ends up meeting good kings and bad kings. He meets the Pharaoh of Egypt because he travels through there. He also meets Malik Sadiq in another land. So this is the sunnah of the prophets and the messengers. Okay, so now we've given a brief history and we've demonstrated the problem that the world is facing today, and we've tied it back to the Bible, and we see that the people that are proclaiming themselves to be Christians or Jews or Muslims in these different countries, they are totally right now not playing the role of the Muslims or the Christians or the Jews in the Bible, the Quran or the Torah. They're actually taking on now the roles of the enemies of the Christians and the Jews and the Muslims. They are playing the role now. The Muslims right now, they're not behaving in their countries like the Prophet Muhammad or the Muslims in Medina that welcomed in the immigrants. The countries in the Middle East right now and their administrations are pushing away refugees. We see them doing that now. We saw them doing that before when they rejected to open up their doors to receive Syrian migrants, Iraqi migrants, and other Muslim migrants that come from other countries in Africa or beyond. And so they're behaving more like the tyrants of Mecca were. And Mecca itself, the so-called Mecca in so-called Saudi Arabia, you can see that it's not a place that's open for refugees. It's not a place that is open for migrants. They don't take anybody in. You have to have thousands of dollars to go make Hajj in Mecca. You have to have, you have to be very privileged in order to get the opportunity to apply for a visa, get approved, go down there, spend your money at the McDonald's and the Kentucky Fried Chicken, order yourself a hotel room in that big tower with the horns that's casting its shadow over the Kaaba to let the Muslims know that there's something higher than the Kaaba, there's something higher than God in Saudi Arabia. And so they're behaving and they're treating Mecca more and Medina more like a tourist destination in the same way that the Bani Umayyah, Abu Sufyan and these guys were treating the Kaaba at the very beginning of Islam as just a place where commerce is taking place, trade is taking place, and money is to be made. You find the Christian administrations all throughout Europe and America is not being hospitable to refugees as Jesus Christ would have commanded us to do and did command us to do. They're behaving more like Nero and the tyrants of Rome.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very clear. They would rather light the people on fire than let them, be a part of their nation. Exactly. They want to send them away.
Exactly. And I was shared this ridiculous video by your husband, actually. We were sitting one day in the office recently, and he showed me this video that was circulating online. And they were having an interview. There's this guy, he was kind of trying to make a parody, right? He was trying to show how ridiculous the situation has gotten in the United States. And so he's interviewing these right-wing supporters or the followers of Donald Trump. And he asks them the question, which I have actually posed before, which is how would these people deal with the return of Jesus Christ, right, if he came? So he asks them that, and the response of some of them was very frightening. It was horrifying, but it was not surprising because they said actually what is in their hearts, and they said the truth. They said that they would even though they're Christians, they said that Jesus Christ can come stay in America as long as he does so the legal way. Can you imagine that?
Wow. I mean, I think that should be a wake-up call. If those words come out of your mouth, can you call yourself a Christian? I mean, anyone with a mind should be able to know that that is hypocritical. It doesn't make any sense. It's illogical.
So if Jesus crossed the border from Mexico and entered into the United States, he would be deported back to Mexico or perhaps to El Salvador, where he would serve a prison sentence for crossing the border illegally, or perhaps they might even accuse him of terrorism or some sort of intention to incite people to a revolt or something like this, because certainly Jesus said in the Bible that he would come back with the sword, right? And he's not here to bring peace, but to turn people against one another and to rule. But they would not allow that to take place because Jesus doesn't qualify as an illegal immigrant to run for office in the United States. He has to be a natural-born citizen, and Jesus doesn't qualify for that.
That is insanity.
It is insanity. And so the hypocrites have exposed themselves to actually not be real believers in Christianity or in Islam, that they're merely posing as believers, but what they actually believe in is something opposite. They believe in the doctrine of Nero and the doctrine of Abu Sufyan and the disbelievers of the beginning of Islam. And the same thing is true for the Jews and Benjamin Netanyahu and these people. They're not behaving like what Moses would behave like, or what Moses was told to tell the Israelites to behave like when God told them that they have to treat anybody that's settling amongst them as one of their own. They certainly haven't done that. They haven't treated the Palestinians like they are Israeli citizens, and this has led to the criticism of Israel by the entire world, and has led also there to be arrest warrants that were issued for Benjamin Netanyahu and various things like this. So the point is, without getting too much into the politics of it, because that's not the point and that's not what we're trying to do today. What we're trying to do is to show that the behavior of these so-called followers of these religions has shifted, and they are not true to the ideals. And it seems like that's what happens every cycle, and every cycle God sends somebody, a representative, an imam, a messenger, a prophet, who would then build a movement by gathering the refugees and the migrants around them, and the victory ends up going to the united efforts of the immigrants who join forces together in order to stand in the way of oppression, and they end up in the end not necessarily, actually they never do, they don't topple the governments that they're in, which is the fear of they don't take over the governments that they're in, but rather what they do is they end up immigrating and creating their own land. And so you find the Jews not toppling the Egyptian government, not taking it over, they just leave. They have dignity, they have pride. They say, God has pride. He says, if you don't want my people here, then I don't want my people here. It was a blessing that I put amongst you, but now I'm going to take them away. And he leads them out, and he allows them to settle and create their own land and their own country in a new place. And that's the same thing that takes place with the Muslims in the time of Islam. They end up leaving, and that's the same thing that happens with the Christians too, by the way.
Yes.
They don't end up taking over Jerusalem and Israel. They end up immigrating outside, and they go to Europe, and they go to other countries, and they create their own Christian empire over there, not in Israel. And the same thing happens with Islam. They end up migrating from Mecca to Medina, and the only reason why they end up going back to Mecca is because the population converts to Islam, and also that they were actively trying to assassinate the Prophet and invading Medina. And so we expect that the same thing happens again, that the cycle repeats itself. The Sunnah of Allah continues. It doesn't trade. And the Qa'im, he is supported mainly by refugees, by immigrants, by people who are oppressed and weak in the land. And that as a result of their unity and their united effort together, they end up being, enforced by God and have the ability to establish a state somewhere, a new state that is open to all refugees around the world. I want to, in closing, mention something interesting to you. And it's just food for thought for people. Since Donald Trump was being praised recently by his allies for thinking outside of the box and offering a new solution for the crisis with the refugees in Israel and Palestine, let's think outside of the box together today and analyze the data which we have, and let's see what could or could not be done in an alternative suggestion that's presented to the world that would totally relieve them of the refugee crisis. Actually, it would solve the entire world's problem in terms of refugees. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. So according to official statistics, the amount of refugees in the world currently are 45 million refugees worldwide.
Whoa.
45 million refugees worldwide.
That is crazy.
It is crazy. And you know what's even crazier? What's even crazier is that there are 195 countries in the world, with only 34 of them having populations that are above that number.
Wow.
So most of the countries in the world have populations that are under the current refugee population in the world of 45 million.
Wow. So it's just like
Yeah, there's only like 34 countries.
It's a very disproportionate placement of human beings.
Yeah, so what have they done in the past? They have taken these 45 million and they have scattered them across the world. All right, amongst all of the nations. And all of the nations are disgusted by their presence, don't want them. They want to deport them. They are accusing them of being the source of their problem. And so the solution would be that these nations in the world offer a plot of land to these refugees. They would allow them the creation of a state called refugee land, right? That would be home to this new population of people from all around the world, these 45 million people that are trying to escape their countries. Anybody who doesn't feel safe in their country and is a refugee should automatically go to refugee land.
Yeah.
Now, refugee land, and we're going to call it refugee land just for the sake of the mental exercise that we have going on. Refugee land would be, and should be after that, the only country in the world that would accept refugees and migrants. It could be the dumping grounds, the wastelands for refugees. It would solve the immigration crisis in all nations worldwide, and it would also solve the moral dilemma that they find themselves arguing over, the left and the right, whether or not it is morally right to ship the immigrants or return these refugees back to their countries that they deem to be unsafe.
Yes.
They wouldn't have to do that anymore. They wouldn't have to argue about that anymore, because there would be this third safe country, refugee land, that was created specifically for the purpose of being the recipient of refugees from all around the world, and then everybody else could shut their borders and everybody else could be relieved of this problem for all of eternity. And refugee land, it would be very easy to govern. It should be split up into districts, all right, regions. Cities, counties, depending, and each county or each district should be proportionate to the local population that will go and settle in it. So, for example, if you are a Jewish refugee and you don't want to go to Israel, you're trying to escape Israel, or you're trying to escape a different country in the world and you just don't want to go to Israel, then where could you go? You could go to refugee land, and there would be a county or an area or a district of refugee land that would be dedicated specifically to Jewish people. They could live there and they could practice their religion as they see fit and be governed by their own laws. Many of the Jews don't consider that the state of Israel is legitimate.
Yeah. Yes, like the Messiah didn't
well,
come.
they're not implementing Jewish laws.
Yes.
They consider that many of the laws from democracy and elections to be contradictory to Jewish law. They consider that their acceptance, for example, of LGBT people would be contradictory to Jewish laws, etc. So whatever it is that you thought you could go to this district, this county, and you would be able to practice your faith as you saw fit and be governed by your own laws. And it can have a county or district in there that is for Christians, right? And within that district, you can have different smaller subsections that could be governed by, you could have an area for Catholics, an area for Protestants, etc., etc.
Wow.
And the same thing for Muslims, each governed by their own laws, their own Sharia, their own set of rules. And there would be these overarching rules that would govern their interactions with one another. And anybody that came into refugee land would have to accept the basic notion or tenet of faith that they believe that there is one God that is above all, and every Buddhist, Hindu, a Christian, Jew, Muslim, everybody else would agree to some, would agree to some degree that that there is a primary creationary force, right? There's a primary force of creation, a God that is above all, and everybody would agree that like God sent different messengers to different peoples, and that these peoples are brothers in humanity, and that they should be respected to, practice their faith, and that God wants us to be open to refugees and treat the strangers as if they are one of our own. And if we believed that God had different covenants with different people, and the Jew would consider that God has a different covenant with the non-Hebrew people, and perhaps this covenant is the covenant of Islam, or the covenant with the Christians, or that the people of Hinduism and Buddhism are falling underneath a previous covenant that was established, for example, with Noah, and that these are prophets and messengers that came to those nations. If everybody would just respect that and agree upon that, the force, the combined force of the immigrants and refugees that would settle in refugee land would propel that nation to being the number one nation in the world, the richest nation in the world, the most successful and most powerful nation in the entire world. But they would have to accept that tenet. And that would be the solution for the world in terms of the immigration and the refugee crisis, to establish a state. And essentially, that's actually what we're going to eventually see happen with the creation of the divine just state. The creation of the divine just state is going to be a state that is created by the refugees, the undesirables, the true believers in that time that are really reliving the story of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism all over again. The orphan, the widow, the immigrant.
Wow. I mean, I have nothing I can really say to add to that, except for this is the most genius thing I've ever heard. It completely solves this crisis, this refugee crisis in the world, because the issue is there is no place for these people to go. And as you said, why not take God as a refuge and let there be a place for the refugees to go and coexist peacefully.
Exactly.
There is no more beautiful idea than that. And this is so far outside the box. You have done away with the box, because knowledge like this cannot come from anybody except for God.
And I think that these people, the refugees around the world, they can do anything if they join forces and combine their efforts. They can do anything, especially if they're led by a man from God, or that at the head of it there is a just system that's implemented by a man from God that would ensure that the rights are protected for each nation. And the Qa'im, I propose, is that character, because even in the narrations it states that he rules the people of the Torah by their Torah, meaning he allows them to self-govern themselves.
Absolutely.
He rules the people of the Bible by their Bible, meaning what? Meaning he allows the Christians to self-govern their own selves, and the people of the Quran by their Quran, meaning he allows the Muslims also to self-govern their own selves, but he unites them all. And if it was a matter of giving up land, if El Salvador was willing to take in all of these refugees, unlimited amount of criminals and people that are deported back, if you have countries countries in Africa that were willing to sign deals. There should be countries around the world that would each give a small plot of land, or that could come together and offer a particular plot on the planet, or they could grant as a plot for refugee land in the area that nobody else wants. For example, like Antarctica, the refugees, the 45 million from around the world, will happily go out there and begin to work together, and God's hands will be over them, and he would cause the ice to melt, and he would cause that area to be the most beautiful, successful country on the planet. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today, Tiffany. God bless you, and inshallah we'll meet again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Wow, that was a genius episode and a genius proposal from Abu Sadiq, from him is peace, the Qaim of the family of Muhammad. Once again, he is able to solve the world's unsolvable problems, and he has presented a solution that would please the refugees and the nations of the world who do not want the refugees or who struggle to find a place for these people to go. It is a solution that works for everybody. And having lived with Abu Sadiq, from him is peace, for a very long time, I have witnessed how he's able to actually bring together people from the four corners of the world, people from different cultures, speaking different languages. And he's able to actually get these people to come together as one and to live peacefully and prosperously. So he is the perfect and ideal person for this job. I think that this is an amazing goal to have in mind, an undesirable land for an undesirable people. And I can't wait for the people of the world to hear this great glad tidings.